Hello and welcome to Pixel Magic Tutorials. I am your host Geekman, and today we're going to learn how to create a ribbon dot wallpaper in Photoshop. Now, a couple of assumptions that I'm making right off the bat. Number one, I am using Photoshop CC 2017. If you're using an earlier version of Photoshop, some of the effects may not work as expected. Second, I am using Windows. So if I say hit the Control key on the keyboard for Mac users, that means hit the Command key. And when I say hit the Alt key on the keyboard for Mac users, that means hit the Option key. So with all of that out of the way, let's begin by hitting Control N on the keyboard to bring up our new image dialog box. And let's name this as ribbon dot wallpaper. That works pretty well. And what we want to do is make the width 3,840 pixels, height of 2,160 pixels, resolution of 150 pixels per inch, RGB color 8-bit, white background, doesn't really matter. We're going to be changing that very quickly. The color profile is Adobe RGB 1998, and we're using square pixels. Let's hit create, and we are now ready to begin creating our ribbon dot wallpaper effect. The first thing that we need to do is we are going to change our foreground and background color to their default black and white. And we do that by hitting D on the keyboard or by going over here to our tools palette and clicking on the tiny little black and white icon, which will change your foreground and background back to their default black and white. The next thing that we need to do is create a brand new layer, and we will name this layer Clouds. Okay, so you click on the little new layer icon on your layers palette and then double click on the name to rename it as Clouds. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to use our filter. So let's go up to Filter, let's go up to Render and Clouds. And we now have some clouds. Now, the next thing that we need to do is add a layer style to the clouds layer to give it a rainbowish kind of effect. Okay, so what we're going to do is on our clouds, we're going to go to our layer styles here, and the layer style that we're looking for is just a gradient overlay. Now, the gradient overlay that we're looking for is going to be, we're going to need 3 of them. So let's right away hit 3 gradient overlays. So let's go plus and plus again. So we now have 3 gradient overlays. Now, on the top one here, what we want to do is we want to make the blend mode difference. Okay, and we want to put dither on. We want to make the opacity here 100%, and the gradient that we want to use is spectrum, which is this guy right here under your default gradients. Now, if you don't see your defaults, if you've changed them or altered them in some way, just go here to the sprocket, go down to reset gradients, and then hit OK, and it will reset back to your standard gradients. So the one that we want is spectrum, so let's hit that. And what you want to do is make it linear, and you want to make it 0 for the degrees, and you want to make the scale 100%. So there, that is our first one right there. Bang. The second one down, let me turn off what we've got here. The second one below that, so gradient overlay, the second gradient overlay, the one below the top gradient overlay, we want to make this also is going to be difference. We are going to make dither on. We are going to make this 100%. We're then going to go here to spectrum again, like so. We're going to leave linear is what we're going to have here, and we're going to make this 90 degrees, like so, and the scale that we're using is, again, 100%. Then the third one, let me just hit check here, and let me get rid of this one down here. So the third one that we need here is going to be a blend mode of soft light. So let's find soft light. Where are you, soft light? I just saw you. There you go. Soft light. We're going to make dither is going to be on. The opacity here is only going to be 50%. The gradient that we are using is still spectrum. We're going to change the style to radial to make it a circle. We are then going to change the angle here is going to now be 0. And the scale that we're using is going to stay at 100%. So those are our 3 gradient overlays on our cloud layer. We hit OK, and as you can see, we now have rainbow effects all over the place on our clouds from dark to very bright colors. Then what we're going to do is we're going to convert this clouds layer into a smart object. So let's right click on our clouds layer and let's convert to smart object, and let's name this dots. Okay, So now our smart layer is named dots, but if we double click on that to change it, it is named clouds. So that's how we know that we're working with the right stuff. So now that we have our dots layer here, what we want to do is go to filter, pixelate, and mosaic. So let's go up here to filter, let's go to pixelate, and then to mosaic. Now for the mosaic, we just want to enter a cell size of 50. That's really the only option that you have here to do. You're going to hit OK, and we now have our filter and our clouds are now pixelated. The next thing that we want to do, again on our dots layer, is we want to go to our filter gallery. So let's go up here to filter. Let's go to filter gallery. And what we're going to do is we're going to add in a bunch of filters here. So let's get rid of anything that we might have here that is not correct. So now our first filter, the first one that we want is glowing edges. Okay, and you can find glowing edges. Ooh, where are you? Are you under artistic? I always forget where these things are. Brush strokes, glowing edges. Are you here? No, not there, not here. Then it's got to be under style. No, yeah, stylize. Yes, stylize. So here we go, glowing edges. And what we want is 6, then 10, and then 15. So luckily it was set up properly for me here, but that's what we want. So that will give you this kind of cool looking effect. The next thing that we need to do is add a new effect layer. So click on the little new effect layer here. And what we want is accented edges to be the very next one. So the second one here is going to be accented edges. So we find that here under texture, I think. No, not under texture, under artistic. No. Where are you? Under sketch. Accented. No. Brush strokes. Accented edges. There we go. Accented edges. And we want it to be here a 6. We want it to be 50 and then 15. So we're going to make this 50 and we're going to make this 15. Okay, and you can see that it's beginning to look like dots. Okay, the next thing that we want is another glowing edges. So we're going to hit the new effect layer here. We're going to go back to glowing edges and we're going to change these numbers up here, the values, to 2 and then 15 and then 15. So now you can see that it's looking very much like dots. Now we need one more filter gallery filter, which is paint daubs. So we're going to hit a new effect layer here, and then we're going to find paint daubs. Now, can I do it in one shot? I think it's under artistic. Let's see. Paint daubs, plastic wrap, paint daubs. I was right. Woohoo, I win. Okay, so what we want the options to be here is a brush size of 35, and we want a sharpness of 40, and we want the brush type to be simple. And we now have this very cool looking effect for our dots. Once we are done with that, we're going to hit OK, and we now have our entire background filled with these dots. The next thing that we want to do is we want to duplicate this dots layer. So let's minimize it by hitting on the arrow. Then we want to duplicate this, which is Control J on the keyboard to duplicate it. We're then going to rename this as extra dots, and we're going to hide this layer. We don't need it yet, but we will very soon. So we're going to just hide it for now and keep it in our back pocket. Now we click back on our original dots layer, and we're going to set the opacity here to only 15%. 1.5. Okay. Oh, one thing that we do want to do is our background here. We want to make this all black. So since our foreground color is all black, what we have to do is just hit Alt and backspace. And now our background is black. So now our dots look like they're faded into a black background. So that's what we need there. The next thing that we want to do is we want to add a layer mask to dots. So we want to go down here to layer mask, make sure that dots is selected, and you go to layer mask, and we now have a layer mask on our dots layer. Then what we want to do is we want to select the gradient tool by hitting G on the keyboard, or by selecting the gradient tool right over here. And since our foreground and background are black and white, we are on the default black to white gradient. Now, what we want to do is leave it as the black and white, or if it's not here, then you can just go here, which is a black and white gradient. See, it says black, white. And what you want to do is make sure that you are on reflected right here. And then what we want to do is make sure that it is normal, 100%. Reverse is on. So click on reverse. Dither and transparency are also checked at this point. And then what we want to do is draw a gradient from somewhere near the center of our image to the very top. So let's just go right about here-ish, and let us hold down Shift, which will constrain our gradient to a straight line here. And we will go up to the top right about here and then let go. And as you can see, we now just have a line of dots that are visible that fade out both top and bottom. And this will form the background of our ribbons, hence the ribbon dots. So this is the dots, and our ribbons will now go on top of our dots layer. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to create a new layer named Ribbons 1. So let's go to our Layers palette, click on the new layer here, and let us double click on the name and make it Ribbons 1. Okay, then all we have to do to create our ribbons really is use the gradient tool, but use it in a specific way. So let's go to our gradient tool, which is right here. You can get there by hitting G on the keyboard or by clicking on the little gradient tool icon over here on your tools palette. And what we want to do is we want to set our gradient tool up. So let's let's just click once here on our gradient to bring up the gradient editor. So you click on the gradient and your gradient editor will show up. And what we want to do is change our gradient type here to noise from solid. So you want to go to noise, and you will see that we now have a whole bunch of noise for our gradient, and you can hit randomize and it just keeps changing the colors. Okay, now what we want to do is set the options here. We want the noise gradient here to be a roughness of 100%. Okay, just like that. Then what we want to do is we want to check over here on add transparency. So you add in transparency, and as you can see, it adds transparent portions to the gradient. And then what we want to do is we need to fiddle with the sliders to remove the harsh blacks and the super bright colors. So you can go over here to red, just move them out from the back, from the darkest portion, and they don't have to be even. You can mess with them like that. And the bright ones, you just want to bring back slightly, if at all. You don't have to really, but I find that if it's too bright, it takes away from the effect. So, and if it's too dark, it just fades into the black background. Blah, blah, blah. So what we want to do is do something similar to this, and then you just hit randomize a few times until you see colors in the example bar here that you like. And for this particular look, I have found that as long as it has a lot of cool colors, it works fine. So this looks like it would have a lot of pretty cool reds in it, but it's missing a lot of other colors, so I don't want that. This, however, looks like it's got a lot of colors with a lot of space between the colors, which is very important for this look to finish. Now, all you have to do here is hit OK, and you have now a gradient that you can use to create the ribbons. Now, what we want to do is draw this gradient from top to bottom on our Ribbons 1 layer. So make sure that Ribbons 1 is selected, then click and hold down Shift and then drag down. That will constrain the gradient to a straight line. And click somewhere near the top and then stop somewhere near the bottom. And there you go. You now have all of these cool lines of colors that you can use to create your ribbon. Now, you can see up here that it gets a little bit too full of color with the spaces between the colors are a little too small to be really pretty once you turn this into a ribbon. So what you want to do is you want to delete the excess pieces that you don't really like. So you go to your marquee tool by hitting M on the keyboard or by selecting the marquee tool here. Make sure that you're on the new marquee feather of 0 style of normal. And then what you want to do is you want to remove the portions that you don't like. So for me, I don't like this top portion. I want to just start with this blue bar right here. So I'm just going to select that, and then I'm just going to hit delete like so. Then down here, you know what? This is pretty cool. I like this, but I'm going to get rid of all of this up to about here. I do like these, but I think that I need to constrain this to a little bit smaller area. So I'm just going to delete that. And there we go. We now have our ribbons that we're going to use to create the first ribbon effect of this background. Now what you want to do is you want to transform this and shrink it down. And then once it is shrunk down to the size that you like, you want to go to the warp tool to warp it slightly. Okay, so here's how we're going to do that. You're going to hit Control T on the keyboard to bring up the transform tool. We're going to make this smaller. About here-ish is good. Something like that. Let's move this up just so that we can see it a little bit better. And once you have made it the right size for your ribbons, go up to the options bar up here and switch to warp mode. Okay, and now that you have warp mode, what you want to do is you want to warp this a little bit. You want to make it look more ribbon-like. And the way that you do that is you can just grab a portion of it and pull it down. You can grab the outside portion like this and pull this up. Oh, if it'll let me. Why are you not letting me? Okay, let's try this way. There we go. And can we do this? It won't let me. There we go. And then we do this. Like so. Let's bring this down. And as you can see, it's pretty easy to get a look that you find appealing just by moving things around. Now, you can also fold it over itself like so, like this. Now that looks pretty cool to me. You're starting pretty big, it's getting narrower, and then it's spreading out amongst itself again. I think that's pretty darn cool. So for me, this looks good. This looks pretty good. So we're going to stick with this and feel free to mess around with this as much as you like to make the effect, the ribbons look the way that you find most appealing. Once you have something that you like, you hit Enter on your keyboard to accept your transformation. Let's switch back to my Move tool so you can see my cursor. And here you now have the first bit of your ribbon. Then what you want to do is you want to hit Control T again, and that's not to do any more transforming really. You just want to position this so that it looks coolest on your background. And I have found for me, for my artistic eye, that it looks best going from either the top left to the bottom right or from the bottom left to the top right. Straight across or straight up and down really doesn't look very good to me. So I'm going to start with this guy up from the upper left, and I'm going to just make it big enough so that it comes out to the bottom right, like this. Okay, let me zoom out a little bit. And I zoomed out by using the mouse wheel on my mouse and scrolling it down. That will zoom you out. And there we go. We now have the first bit of our ribbon. And now let me zoom back in so that we can see it a little bit better. And here we go. The first bit of our ribbons is ready. So once we have applied that warp and put them in the position that we like, the next thing that we want to do is we want to give them a layer style to help make the ribbons look a little bit more interesting, because as they look a little flat. So what we're going to do is make sure that ribbons 1 is selected. We are then going to go to our layer style, and what we're going to do is give it an outer glow. So let's select our outer glow. And the outer glow that we're going to do is going to be normal, opacity of 100%. Our noise is going to be 0. The color that we're using is black. That's all zeros. And then what we want to do is the technique is softer. The spread is 0. The size is going to be 6. We're going to use linear contour. Anti-alias is unchecked. We're going to do range of 50 and jitter of 0. And as you can see, that made the ribbons look a little bit nicer. See, if I turn it off and I turn it on, it stands out a little bit more from the background. We're then going to hit OK. And what we're going to do is we're going to fade out now the ends, the bottom left, the bottom right, and the top left of our ribbons. We're going to fade them out using a layer mask and a soft brush. So let's make sure that our ribbons 1 is selected. Let's add in a layer mask to ribbons 1. Let's also zoom out a little bit more so we can see the corners a little bit easier. And then what we're going to do is get our brush tool by hitting B on the keyboard, and we are going to go to our brush presets and our brush options, and we're going to make sure that we are using a soft round brush. Okay, we don't have to set anything else other than a soft round brush, which is on your standard brushes. And then we're going to make it very large. Now the size that I'm using is 1300 pixels. That's so that I can just sit right here on the outside and press once, making sure that my foreground color is black. I can press here like that and here like that to fade out that area, and then I can do the same thing here. Press here like this, press down at the bottom like that, and I have now faded out the top and the bottom of my ribbons. And there we go. That is how you do this ribbon effect in Photoshop. It's very simple and easy. Now, this is already running very long, so I'm going to quickly go through what we're going to do to add in some text on the bottom. Now, you remember that we had this extra dots layer that we saved for later? Well, we're getting very close to needing to use this. Now, one other thing I do want to mention before I move on, the ribbons, you can add in more than one ribbon. You can add in just this one. You can then repeat this by creating another layer, naming it ribbons 2, and repeating the steps that I did to create these ribbons, creating another ribbon, layer it on top, and then you would have more than one ribbon, and it would look like you're circling around each other. It's a very cool effect, but I'm not going to do that now because we're already running long. Now what we want to do is we want to add in some text on the bottom and some extra dots along the bottom to make our background more personal. So what we're going to do is make sure that we are still on ribbons 1. Actually, no, we're going to go above extra dots. So make sure that extra dots is selected, which is our topmost layer. And then we're going to add in one more layer on top. We don't need to name it because this is going to be our text layer. Okay, so we are going to go to our text tool, hit T on the keyboard, and we're going to select a font. Now I'm using CF Dots 521. It's a free download. I have a link in the description below where you can download this. And once you have downloaded it and installed it, the font that I'm using, as I said, is CF Dots 521. And I'm going to use a specific color for this. And the color that I'm going to use, let's start with any color, as long as it is a color, not black, not white, and not gray. You want it to be a color. So I have a lot of colors in my ribbon, so I'm going to choose a color from my ribbon. A nice bright green looks like it would work pretty well. So we're going to try and select a bright green here like this. There we go. There is a nice bright green. We'll just make it a little bit brighter. There we go. So select a color from your ribbons so that your font and your text will match the look of your design. Hit OK, and we're now ready to write. Now I'm using CF Dots 521 at 46 points, sharp, centered, and the color that I'm using is the color that we picked up from the ribbon. So you click and you write your text, Pixel Magic, as always. And as you can see, let's hit the check mark here and go back to my Move tool, which is V on the keyboard. As you can see, I now have my text. Now, let's add in some layer styles to the text to make it a little bit more interesting than just these dots. So let's go here to our layer styles and let's go to stroke. Now we're going to want 2 strokes here for our layer style. So let's add in 2. And for the top one, what you want to do is make the size 3. You want to make it centered instead of outside. The blend mode that you want is going to be normal. Okay, and the opacity that we want is going to be 100, and you want to make sure that overprint is checked. The fill type is going to be a gradient, and we're going to choose noise yet again. So just click here, go to gradient type, make it noise, and what we want it to be is 50% as it is. And then what we want to do is just randomize this. You don't need to change anything, just randomize it until you see some colors that you like. And base it on the colors that you see here and see how it matches up. So let's randomize just a little bit, and there. That looks pretty good. See, it's got a nice little effect in there. So let's hit OK. And the angle, the style that we want is reflected. Reverse is unchecked. Aligned with layer is checked. The angle that we want is going to be 92, slightly off from center. So as you can see, it now goes from the bottom left to the top right. And the scale that we want is going to be 150. So there you go. You've now got this nice subtle-ish kind of effect going on in your text. But we want a second stroke. So our second stroke here is going to be size of 2. Inside, no, we're going to make it centered. We're going to go to lighten instead of vivid light. We're going to do lighten. Where is lighten? Where is lighten? Lighten. And the opacity that we want it to be is going to be 75. Then we want to make sure overprint is on. The fill type is going to be gradient yet again, and it's going to be another noise sample. So let's hit noise, and we want this to be 50%. We want to make it randomized like so. That looks fine to me, and everything else looks pretty good. Let's hit OK. And the angle that we want is going to be 88. And it's going to be 150 also, 150. Now, the issue that I have here is that I reversed the stroke layers. This stroke, the one that we just made, that is a blend mode of lighten, needs to be the topmost one. So let's hit the little arrow here to move it to the top. And as you can see, that changed the look of our gradient. So we had that, we now have this. That's a much cooler look, I think, than just the straight single stroke. So now that we have done that, we're going to hit OK, and our text is now ready. Now what we want to do is use our extra dots here. So we want to unhide our extra dots, which covers up everything. Then we want to go here to Pixel Magic or your text layer. You want to grab it and you want to move it down to a nice position where it covers up a lot of dots like this. See that? It's on par with these dots. And let's move it just a little bit of center here. Okay, like that. And what we want to do is we want to select a few dots to the left and a few dots to the right of Pixel Magic. So we go back to our marquee tool and we're going to select them. Now let's zoom in a little bit. And again, I am using my scroll wheel in order to scroll in and out, to zoom in and out. And what we want to do if we need to move this around is just hold down the space bar on your keyboard, and then you can change to the hand tool and you can move the canvas around so that you can see things a little bit better. So right here what we want is we want to select, let's say, the first 4 before Pixel Magic like that, and then holding down the shift tab, the shift button on your keyboard, which will add a little plus to the selection marquee tool, we then want to select the 4 to the right, like so. Once you have 2 selections of whatever dots that you want, we want to add to extra dots a layer mask. Now, making the selections beforehand means that it will mask out everything except for the areas that you have selected. So now that we have selected those, we're just going to hit on add layer mask. And as you can see, everything has gone away except for the dots that we have here. Now we can clean up little extra stuff like these red markings here by selecting that and then hitting Alt backspace to fill them with black on our layer mask. Make sure you're on the layer mask in order for that to work though. And then you can hit Control D to deselect, and we are now ready with our final wallpaper. So this is how you make ribbon dot wallpaper in Photoshop. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up, and subscribe. I do new tutorials every Tuesday. And once again, I am Geekman signing off for Pixel Magic Tutorials.